Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is cosmic geography, the three-tiered universe. If you ask the typical Christian what the ancient Hebrews thought of the universe, they would probably not be very willing to admit that the ancient Hebrews did look at the universe in what people will call a flat earth model, a three-tiered universe which consisted of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Now, I will be the first to tell you that I do not believe that the Bible was meant to be a science book. So many of the verses that people use to support the flat earth model and to say that they were in the Bible specifically to tell us what the earth looked like, I don't necessarily agree with that. Now, do I think the earth is a sphere? No, I think that the earth is very likely an enclosed plane. I just don't think that the Bible verses that many people use to say that here is the definitive evidence that the Bible is describing a flat earth. I don't believe that we should be viewing them that way. I think that the Bible is a book of covenants. It is a covenantal book, and it is written from the perspective of the ancient Hebrews who also viewed the earth in this way, in this three-tiered manner. And make no mistake that they certainly weren't the only ones. You know, the ancient Near East cultures, they also viewed the earth very similarly to how the ancient Hebrews did. Now, was it exactly the same? No, it wasn't exactly the same. But as Brian Godawa says in when Giants Were Upon the Earth, and I'll leave a link in the description to this book if you would like to get it. But what he says is that there was no singular technical physical description of the cosmos in the ancient Near East, but rather patterns of thinking, similarity of images, and repetition of motifs. A common simplification of these images and motifs is expressed in the three-tiered universe of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. So I'm going to go back to this one right here. And this is actually, I believe this one was, this is from Logos Bible Software. Dr. Michael Heiser was a resident scholar for Logos Bible Software. And I actually watched a talk that he gave many years ago in which he himself was saying that, yes, the Bible is, I'm sorry, not the Bible, the earth is described as a flat earth. And now he is saying that he does not agree with that, and but he said that you have to admit that if you are viewing the earth as a sphere, you are not looking at the earth from a biblical worldview. You are viewing the earth from a scientific worldview, because the biblical worldview, when it comes to the shape of the earth, was this three-tiered universe, a level. Now, I don't like to say flat, even though that's usually what it's called, because people will say, well, it can't be flat because there were mountains. Obviously, I don't think that anyone is saying that the earth is 2D. What they're saying is that there is no curvature. If you are looking at the parts of the earth that are not hills and are not mountains and are not, canyons, if you are looking at just the common ground, there is no curvature. So that is what is meant by flat earth, not this idea of a 2D world. I think that's ridiculous, and I can't believe that that's what some people even think is meant. But anyway, so the three tiers would be, we have the heavens, and then we have the earth, and then we have the underworld, or as in the Bible, it's called Sheol, and then underneath that is the great deep. So 1, 2, 3. I pulled up some images of some ancient Near Eastern, I already said ancient Near East cosmology, just to show you that it is very similar. Yes, not exactly the same, but very similar, and still has this three-tier structure going on. We have the heavens, the earth, and the underworld, and that's Sumerian. And then there's Babylonian also had the three-tiered cosmology, but actually when I looked up images for Babylonian, I couldn't really find any. So I just kind of threw this in there just because I thought that these chimeric creatures were pretty cool. And right here, oh, this is Babylonia. So I wonder, oh, that one was Babylonia too. I must have left it in there even though I found something. But anyway, so the Babylonian universe was a three-tier structure with a flat earth floating on waters under the heaven. And here's an ancient stone that's depicting how the earth was thought of by the ancient Babylonians. Now, Egypt is not in the ancient Near East, but it is very similar. As you can see, this reminds me very much of the Sumerian, but here we have the sky god Nut, and she is stretching over this flat earth, which is Geb, and then we have the Duat, which is the underworld. It's also very interesting that you will find serpents throughout all of these different mythologies, and including, in biblical motifs. So you have to wonder, are are these ancient Near Eastern cultures, are they seeing, or do they have many of the same thoughts that the biblical, authors did, but they may have seen it in a skewed manner? Because here, it shows Apophis, who is the serpent of chaos. And then even in the Bible, we have Leviathan, who was also a serpent of chaos. And I believe even in Norse mythology, which I did pull up a picture, because Norse mythology is also very similar. I don't see where that photo got to. Let me find it. So this is Norse mythology, and Norse mythology actually has an ancient serpent of chaos, but that's not what this video is about, but I just wanted to mention it. So here we have, again, this looks very similar to a three-tiered structure. We have the heavens, the earth, and then we have underneath. They're all different, but they all have the same basic structure, which, would make a lot of sense with if they were all in the ancient Near East, then, it would make sense that they would have similar views on this sort of thing. But then we even have the Norse people believing this, and there were similar views in the Americas as well. Reading from page 91 in When Giants Were Upon the Earth, it says, regarding Mesopotamian texts in Sumerian and Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cosmology, the heavens above were subdivided into the heaven of Anu, or the chief god, at the very top, the middle heavens below him, and the sky. In the middle was the earth's surface, and below that was the third level that was further divided into the waters of the abyss and the underworld. And yeah, it sounds very, very similar to biblical cosmology. So Brian Godawa, the author of the book that I've been reading from, he shares some verses in the Bible that definitely seem to reinforce the idea that the biblical authors, even up through after Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection, even in the New Testament by that point in time, they still had this conception of the earth as being a three-tiered universe. So here are just some examples. Philippians 2:10. So at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. Now the whole first of all, three tiers here. 1, 2, 3. And it does, I've done a few videos on inhabitants of the underworld, and it really does make you wonder, what specifically they were talking about when they said under the earth. Again, here we have another example, Revelation 5:3. And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. Three-tiered structure. And again, under the earth has always intrigued me. It makes me think of that book that I read aloud here. What was that one called? Where they went to the North Pole. I can't believe that I can't remember the name of it. That's it. That's the name of it. I had to pause and look it up. It's The Smoky God, or A Voyage to the Inner World by Willis George Emerson. And so I will link that playlist at the end of this video in case you wanted to listen to that book, because it's It's amazing. And it comes across, it's written and labeled as a fiction. But if you read it and if you look at all the footnotes and the very scientific things that are written in, it certainly doesn't seem like fiction as you're reading it, but it's very, very interesting. And that actually talks about inhabitants beneath the earth, although that book is written from a heliocentric perspective. But anyway, Revelation 5:13. And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them saying, to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. Here we have Old Testament, Exodus 20, verse 4. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. And then next we have Matthew 11:23. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? If you look down here, it says lifted to heaven. So think of going up. You will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works done in you and had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. So here we have exalted or lifted to heaven or brought down to Hades. So if you look at, this picture here, you're thinking here, exalted into heaven or being brought down to Hades. And this is the starting point. So again, we've got that three-tiered structure going on. On page 92 of the same book, it says, the apostles Paul and John were writing about the totality of creation being subject to the authority of Jesus on his throne. So this word picture of heaven, earth, and under the earth was used as the description of the total known universe, which they conceived of spatially as heaven above, the earth below, and the underworld below the earth. And not only did the inspired human authors write of the universe in this three-tiered fashion, but so did God himself, the author and finisher of our faith, when giving the commandments on Sinai. Then we have these passages about Jesus ascending into heaven. And what does ascending mean? It means to go up. And then many times in the New Testament also it says that they were brought down to Hades, or they went down to Hades. So this is showing that the biblical authors did have a very spatially oriented idea of where heaven is and where the earth is. Now, in my opinion, and I could definitely be wrong, I still see heaven as being, another realm. Okay. I don't necessarily think that if we would fly straight up and, there's a firmament there and that there's a little door, and then if we enter it, we're going to be standing in heaven on top of, this dome. I used to believe that, but I don't at this point in time believe that it is actually a place in this realm. Okay. Because that description of it kind of makes it sound like it's in this realm, but it's just northward. And to me, I don't believe that. I believe that it's actually a realm that you need to enter spiritually, not, and again, spiritual bodies may have some semblance of physicality, but I don't think it's the same sort of physicality that we have here. And I hope you're all realizing that this is speculation. I'm just giving my thoughts on this, but I wanted to share some of these verses that Brian shared regarding, Jesus's ascension, and the idea again that the biblical authors, they thought of heaven as being up, up in the sky. Acts 1:9-11. He was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. And while they were gazing into heaven as he went, so they're gazing upwards as he went, behold, two men stood by them in white robes and said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking into heaven? This Jesus who was taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven. He has a few other examples here. And I actually had that one pulled up and I just read it to you without you seeing it, but that's okay. John 3, here, it's right here. I'll have a link for it in the description. That's the one that I just read. John 3:13. No one has ascended into heaven except he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. So here we have this idea of up and down. John 6:62. Then what if you were to see the Son of Man ascending to where he was before? John 20:17. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." And then we have Ephesians 4:8-10. Therefore it says, "When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men." In saying he ascended, what does it mean but that he had also descended into the lower regions, the earth? He who descended is the one who also ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all the things. So yeah, we're back to this whole idea, of their worldview of looking at, heaven as being up in the sky. So we've got this three-tiered universe here going on. 1, 2, 3. And then further down the page on 92, Brian said, one may naturally wonder if this notion of heaven above may merely be a symbolic or figurative expression for the exalted spiritual nature of heaven. Since we cannot see where heaven is, God would use physical analogies to express spiritual truths. And then later on page 93, he said, the location of heaven being above us may be figurative to our modern cosmology, but it was not figurative to the biblical writers. So I found that to be interesting too. I think this whole idea of what our realm actually looks like is so interesting to think about. But I'm at the point, where I don't talk about this a whole lot because this is not something to me that I'm willing to argue with people about. I think that NASA is ridiculous, and I think the moon landing was ridiculous, but it's not something that I'm willing to argue with people in the comments about, because to me this just is not as important as, the reality that Jesus fulfilled all of his promises when he said he would fulfill them. And so that has pretty much taken over my interest. But, I still like sharing stuff like this every once in a while. So if you don't believe in this, I'm not going to argue with you about it because, you know, I could be wrong. And I know that people are going to say, well, the Bible says that the earth is flat. Well, again, I don't think that the Bible is a science book. I think it's a book of covenants. I think it was written from the perspective of the people who were living at that time. Do I agree with their perspective on what the earth looked like? Yeah, largely yes. Um, but again, I don't think that the Bible is a science textbook, and so we shouldn't be trying to prove the shape of the earth with it, because that's not what the Bible was about. It wasn't about the shape of the earth. It was about covenants, which are, and our redemption. And, it's about Jesus and what he did. And I just don't think that the shape of the earth matters that much in the grand scheme of things. I know people are going to get mad that I'm saying that, but those are just my thoughts. I don't think that it really matters. And I think that if we're going to prove that the earth, has no curvature, we can do that with science. So anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.